Okay, let's carry on with part 2 of chapter 1. We left off with talking about the basic components of an information system, which again was data, database, process, and information. We talked a bit about what GAGO was. So let's dig in a little deeper into the data component of the MIS model. All right, so data component of an information model it considers the input, or consider it the input of the system. So data is whenever a system collects the data from the object, whether it's a person or it's a record, it's a product, or what have you. It's the raw data. So if you're collecting information on a person, that example that would be, you want to know their name, their age, maybe a little bit about maybe how tall they are or what kind of clothes they wear, whatever kind of information or what kind of data that you're actually collecting. Now, data can be collected from a variety of sources. Now, a lot of data in companies is collected internally. This would be things like, did the salespeople, how much did they sell? And that's easily collected. The personnel records would be who works for the company and how long have they worked for the company, what type of role do they play for the company, that sort of data. So that's examples of internal data. So when they talk about, what are the key sources of data, there's internal and, of course, external data would be things like, we want to collect things on our customers, our competitors, who supplies us with our products, any of the government agencies involved, our banking information, labor and demographic statistics, as well as economic conditions. All this is additional data companies utilize to help come up with better information, and that's managing information systems. So there is a YouTube video that I would like to recommend that you guys watch, and what it's on. Let me pop it up here. It's on. It's a TED Talk by Tim Berners-Lee. Now, this guy, if you don't know who he is one of the architects of the internet. So this guy really knows what he's talking about. He worked for CERN, if you know what CERN is, and he was tasked to come up with a way of creating the internet, basically. So he developed, co-authored the protocol of HTTP, which is what we still use today for transmitting most of our internet traffic over the internet. So this guy really knows what he's talking about, and he's talking about how linking data. And I think this is a good TED Talk because, and even though this TED Talk is 10 years old, it's great because you can look at it and what's happening today and what they were planning and have they got there yet. So it's actually relevant to today. This guy's really ahead of his time. So anyway, I would encourage you guys to watch that video. All right. Data has a time orientation or a life expectancy. So data needs to be looked at on a regular basis. Past data may not be relevant anymore. So here's a perfect example. With my job, I'm doing data analytics with courses and programs at Douglas College, and there's really good looking data, but the problem is the data was back in January. At the time of this recording, it was past that time. So the data is old. It's too old. So anyway, I would emphasize that data has time oriented. It's very time sensitive. Now, when you're collecting data like on a person and they say, well, what is your name? Like, does your name really have a time element to it? Well, it still can. Like, if you think about it, people do change their name. People get married, they change their names, or they just change their name for whatever reason. So that can even change as well over time. So you need to keep in mind that when data is being collected, how long is that data going to live? And there's, it can have a huge impact on the performance reports, past data reports or current data. So past data, when they're talking about past data and the performance, means historically, looking back at things like maybe the first, second, third, or fourth quarter of a financial statement of a company. They can go back to the first quarter or the past data and look at how are they performing from year to year, which is very good. So you want that timestamp data, but also you have to consider there's current data, what's going on right now, and that's what we use for operational maybe reports. So for example, we've looked at past performance for students. In the past, how many students were coming in to compare to how many students are coming in today. Also, coming in today, we need to do day-to-day operations. Students that are taking current classes, we need that because that's operational data. That's current data. So keep a mindful thought that when you're collecting data, whether there's a time sensitivity to it. Very important because that has an impact on the information that data then can produce. All right, so data can be collected in different forms, in a sort of an unorganized or uncollected or deaggregated data, which helps like the sales by like products, then by the territory and by salespeople. So it's not really aggregated. Well, aggregated data is accumulated or summarized data, and it helps overall performance. Looking at like in an entire quarter, like looking at the total sales for the first 3 months of the year, etc. So disaggregated data compared to aggregated data, which is not really summarized or collected, it's more individual, things like a product or territory or person, where aggregated data is more of a summary or collected or summarized data, aggregated data. Now, the database, which is our second, or sorry, is the next component of the model. So it's collecting all of the data that you put in a meaningful way. So collecting relevant data organized in a series of integrated files. Now, what they mean by integrated files is you might have a data that's all the students, and you have another database that's all the courses, and then they integrate those two so they can find out what students are connected to which classes. So that's what they're referring to, which makes up a fully functioning database management system. All right. And this is essential for the success of any information system, is that the data structures are set up very carefully, well thought out, organized, and efficient. Database management systems is a category on its own. It's a career path. A lot of people actually focus on database management systems, and they make a career of it. At Douglas College, we have a few individuals that are dedicated strictly to our database management systems. But there's a lot of them out there. So when you're selecting a database management system, maybe to learn, you kind of get bought into a particular managing information system. So here's an example of a lot of the top database systems, like Oracle, for example. Oracle is the database management system that we use at Douglas College. It's one of the largest in the world, and we use it for keeping track of all of our students, our courses, our instructors, all sorts of stuff. They call it Banner, which is a branded version of the Oracle database. But you can look through this list, and there's a lot of different database systems on the market. So if you were to learn just Oracle, and then you're going for a job with a different management information system like MySQL, there's a lot of overlap, but there's a learning curve as well. So I keep in mind that when you are actually selecting the database management system, there's a big learning curve, and you'll want to sort of specialize. And so I always recommend learning the one that's most common out there. Oracle is probably one of the biggest. If you're in accounting, you might want to take something like SAP, especially if you want to work for SAP or a company that uses SAP software. All right, so it's used to create, organize, and manage all the different databases, which hence manages the data. So the database is the system that manages the data. That's why it's the second in the sequence. Okay, so it reduces personnel time needed to gather and process and interpret the data manually. If you did this manually, we wouldn't be competitive. Douglas College didn't have a database management system. We couldn't keep track of our students in an effective way. We'd have literally teams of people keeping track of individual students on paper and pencil. And that's, how they did it years ago, but they just weren't competitive. They can't compete. You need a proper system to compete. And wherever you end up working, they will have more than likely a database management system or several. And it's good to understand what goes into the system, what type of questions you can ask, and what kind of information you can get out of the system. And that's hence part of this course right here. All right, so the third part of the process is the process. Or it comes by different names. Process, sometimes they refer to it by querying or calculating. So it's to generate the most useful type of information for making decisions. So now that you've got your data entered and it's organized in the database, you can start asking it questions and then process the data into meaningful information. So the process component sometimes is referred to as a query or a question that you ask of the data to pull out the information. It can help calculate the data, which is part of the process. Like you can take maybe how many sales of a particular product at a certain price and calculate how much is the total for a particular period of time. So you phrase it almost in a question, like how much did we earn for a particular month? And we can ask that question in the database, and the computer can then process that to generate meaningful information. Transaction process reports is similar to that point of sales system. Hence, they've got the name process right in it. So it's transaction, meaning every transaction is processed and generates a report, is another variation of that. So there could be a couple more points here. And I think if you go through the textbook, I think there's a couple more points that you should read up on the process part of this model. Now, the final part is the information. Really, this is what the companies want. And processed data into meaningful information is an output of the information system. So when you enter that data, you store the data and you ask it questions, hopefully what you get out of that is a meaningful output or meaningful information that the management can use. And it needs to be done in a timeline, a timely manner. So the right information at the right time. For example, if I wanted a list of all my students, I asked the question, I want to process the database and said, okay, can you send me a report, a list of all my students in my class? It's a pretty standard report, and that's good information for me to have. That way I know who I have. But if I asked the question 2 months ago, and I got the report, well, there could be students that haven't signed up for the course yet, or maybe there's students today that dropped out. So the information I got 2 months ago is not that relevant. It's got errors in it. It's not as meaningful. So the quality of that report is diminished. So having it on a timeline or timely report is very important to keep into consideration as well. So the information is triggered by the time. Integrated with other data and information systems. Now, this is very important because I just showed you a model of all of those other database management systems that are out there. And for example, there's all of these. Are these connected? Can I get the database from here talking to the database here? And if you watch the TED Talk with Tim Berners-Lee, he talks about this back in 11 years ago or more. So it's so important how the data has to be integrated with other systems. And are they compatible? Can you transfer the data over? So this is a real problem and has been for many years because every one of these companies thinks that they're organizing their data in the most meaningful way, and they sell companies on that. And once you buy in, that's what you get. So to transfer from one to the other is very difficult. And personally, I don't think that's really going to happen until quantum computing comes online and a lot of artificial intelligence is able to adapt and correlate the data in a meaningful way to make that work. But integration does happen between different platforms. Sometimes you see it in what they call a comma separated value file or CSV file. You see that a lot in Microsoft Excel, transferring data and integrating with other systems. Consistency and accuracy. Well, I mean, I really shouldn't have to even say it, but if the information is not consistent and it's not accurate, it's garbage. So this comes back to that term I said earlier, GIGO. If it's garbage going in and you got a garbage question, you're going to get garbage out, you're going to get inaccuracies. And inaccuracies cost money and don't look good. So definitely want to keep another eye on this as well. So you can see here in the information, you got to be on time. It's got to be integrated into other systems. It's got to be consistent and accurate. It's got to be relevant to the user. I could send a report of give me a list of all the students in my class, but if they send it to the wrong instructor, it's not relevant. It's relevant to me, but not to them. So putting it to the right person is another key component. So there's 4 key components. This is a great quiz question. When I ask, what is the information? What are like 4, fundamental things that should be considered when processing information? And it's got to be done timely. It's got to be integrated. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be relevant. Now, Moving on with information and in a way of viewing information, it comes down to the usefulness is affected by the information's user interface. Now, this is a term we use all the time called the UI, the user interface, and that is the way that the user can read or interpret the information. You also get information UIs with the data. So with data collection, you got the UI where you're entering into fields. We've all done it. We've entered our names, our address, and all that stuff into these user interfaces. And a lot of times those user interfaces are not that friendly. They call that a UX, which is user experience. So if you ever see that UX, that means the user experience, and you probably have rated 5 stars on some websites if you've had a good user experience. So what they're talking about here is the information that you're providing, is it easy to read? Is it easy to look at? Is very important. A lot of times this is done in a graphical format, not just numbers like a spreadsheet, but it's done in graphs and charts, it's visualizations. And they call that a GUI. It's a graphical user interface. And these are used because they're easier to look at. They're easier to view. They're simpler to, you might remember back when I showed that example here of the college's faculties, and you could see with a bar chart how easy it is to visualize which department or which faculty is the largest at Douglas College. And within 1 second, you've got a clear visualization picture. And you can do that through a graphical user interface. If I was to show you just piles of numbers, you've got to translate those numbers into a value and then compare them yourself mentally to do that, which you don't want to be able to, you don't want to do that to management or to the users that request the report. Okay. These systems should be able to produce information in different formats, including graphs, tables, and visualizations. Very similar to the one I showed you earlier here. Let me bring that one back up. All right, here it is. So a graph, this is information that is being provided to a very relevant group of people. This is the deans of the college. They get access to this report. So they can see this in a detailed record format. They can see it in a graphical colored visualization, answering 2 important process query questions. What is, and you can almost put the word what is the number of courses by faculty? What are the number of courses by faculty? What are the number of programs by faculty? So those are the 2 key questions. If you can form them as a question, and someone has to be able to ask those questions, generate the report, and see it in a visual graphic representation. Now, if I just gave you all this data below and said, okay, well, there's all the data, and which one of these has the most number of courses by faculty, you'd have to go through and look at each of these and try to figure it out. And it would be impossible, or almost impossible. And the same with this one. If I asked you which faculty has the most programs in it, and you look through all this data, you say, I don't know. I'd start looking and maybe counting up. And then you figure something out and come up with an answer. With this one, bam, they get the answer right away. Management, you definitely want to do that. These decision makers, the CEO and all the people below them need this type of information to make better decisions. So this managing information system right here is framed in that way. All right, so that's why they're saying it should be graphs, tables, and visualizations. Should be easy for the users to understand. So when I presented that report, I asked them, did you have questions? And I didn't get any feedback, so they obviously understood it, or they didn't look at it, which happens too. Okay, so users need to be able to make use of informal information when solving problems. Informal information. So the textbook actually has some examples on this. So I'm not going to get into details in this video on that one. I'm going to get you guys to open up your textbook and do that. So just a note here on your textbook. You guys can go in and open it up, and let me just open up the textbook here. Okay, if you haven't done it yet, you will need to go to the Cengage site. This is actually on my course outline, and create an account to access the textbook. All right, so I'm going to log in, and this in fact is a managing information system on its own. And we're going to open up the textbook here. And I think it's open. And by the way, you guys can sign up for a 14-day trial on this one right here. Take me to my course. That way, if you don't want to continue the course, you haven't spent any money. All right, so here are the chapters in the book. I'm going to go to chapter number 1. Or over here on the right-hand side, the full textbook might be easier. I tend to do this one. I open it up. Up here in the top left corner is the index with all the chapters. I'm going to go with the information system up here. And then here's the PowerPoint slides correlated with the chapter information. So examples of information systems, you guys can go through, and this is where I'm talking about right here. And they go through some examples. And I'm going to ask you guys to go through and read those and answer the questions. How many students are in each major? These are questions that you can ask. So very, very important that you're able to look at a management system and be able to ask meaningful questions. So you really have to put your thinking cap on, and to ask these questions, you really have to understand what your company is, what the database management information you actually collect, how the database is structured, so that you can then ask those questions. And if you can't formulate questions, then you're not going to be able to process anything, and you're really kind of stuck. And that's pretty much the end of the system. So you need to be able to ask those questions. All right, so I'm going to let you guys open up and look at those. I'm not going to spend video time here to do that. All right, so using information systems and information technology. Information technology. Now, this has evolved over time. That means that these systems have been put onto different platforms over time. Currently, most information systems now are being delivered on the internet. They're called software as a service, or SaaS. You are going to have to select a management information system to do an online presentation, and it's going to be on a software as a service. It'll have to be delivered through a software system or MIS system that's actually on the internet. Very similar to the one I'm showing you, like Blackboard. Another one could be, well, there's all sorts, and we'll get into those later. Another option is that you can look at an actual software program that is delivered by a computer or a computer network as an application system. This is how we used to install software. We used to download a software or put a CD in a computer and install a software program on a computer and then connect it to a network and share the information. So it's sort of an older way of doing it, although some of the managed information systems are still delivered in this format. Now, another form of these is, in a larger sense, is the database systems, this database management system like Oracle, the one I showed you, or MySQL, or IBM, or what have you. So this is another type of information technology that we can use. And then finally, we've got one here called the point of sales. And these are those ones you get at restaurants where they collect information, they process it right away. And there's this other one that's kind of a fringe, radio frequency identifier tags. I'm not sure why they have this. I guess because it's an information technology. You see this when you're in clothing stores and they have these little badges on it. So you walk through the sensor, it sets off an alarm, or they can just tap it on the machine and they know what it is. It's got a small little device called a RFID tag, and it collects the data, updates the records. But it's used, like Amazon uses this for tracking their packages, is where you see that right now. All right, let's move on. The importance of information systems. Now, these systems have to be timely, like I said. They have to be relevant to the right person, and they have to be accurate. We talked about this. The information is a critical tool. So if it's not timely, relevant, or accurate, it's not that useful. Why do we do this? Well, it's to enhance a company's competitive position in the marketplace. Without the most up-to-date MIS system, other companies that are competing against you may have a strategic advantage. So companies do tend to move their managing information systems from time to time. They'll move them over. I was at an institution a few years back, and they used to use Moodle, which is a massive open online development learning environment. It's an acronym. And they moved that learning management system over to Blackboard because they wanted to be more competitive, because they thought Blackboard was a more accepted learning management platform. So they want to remain competitive as an institution. If you have an old system, students may not go. Managing the 4 M's of resources. Now, this is a great quiz question. What are the 4 M's? Well, it's manpower, people, machinery, hardware, materials, your product, and your money to run your company. Those are the 4 M's. And these information systems help you organize your people. They help organize the hardware and software. They help organize the products, or in the school's case, it's not the product, it's the material, it's the students, and then the money. So there are sometimes management information systems for each of those. So these are the four M's or resources that these managing information systems control. Now here's some examples of some other ones. Every company, most companies have some kind of a human resource information system or human resource. So HRIS. A lot of students are going into this as a career choice. It's a great area to go into. And there are a lot of software systems out there that do that. So just as an example, let's say that you guys pick that area as your expertise, that this is the area that you want to pursue. Well, you guys are going to get online and research all of the human resource software as a service. Now, this is a software as a service. It means you can get the software right now online and actually run it from this website. And what you're going to have to do is get in, learn the product, set it up, enter data, organize the data, ask it questions, and develop reports. So you're going to have to actually do exactly what I'm talking about, but you guys get to pick the system that you're going to evaluate. I want it to be as meaningful to you as possible. All right, so personal information systems, or HRIS, I think they call it, because I don't think that's a great acronym, as for obvious reasons. Designed to provide information that helps decision makers in personal care out task effectively. Okay, just so it's to help manage your personnel. Here's another area, logistics, information systems. Now, this one here, you might think of, well, what's the logistics? Logistics is simply the logical process of getting a product from the supplier to the client. It's the supply chain, maybe is another way to get it. It's designed to reduce the cost of transporting some kind of product in a very safe, reliable way of delivering it. So if you think of things like UPS, FedEx, Purelator, or even Amazon, all of those kind of companies have huge logistic information systems to make sure that their products are transported correctly and fastly and effectively to their customers. You think about it. Amazon right now in Vancouver is opening up a massive center. They have distribution centers, I think in Delta, one in New West. They have their main head office downtown Vancouver, and there's going to be literally thousands of jobs that are going to be up for grabs here. If you decide to get into a logistic information system and become very good at that, well, you might have a career path right there. So this will be the system that you might end up focusing on in your career. Manufacturing information systems, MFIS. Okay, so used to manage manufacturing resources. Now, we're in BC, we don't have a lot of manufacturing, but in other parts of the world, there's lots of this. It's to reduce the manufacturing costs, increase the product quality, improve inventory decisions, etc. And there is a website here. I put a link up to just show you an example that there are lots of these different systems out there. Now, this particular one I showed you here has a customer management systems. It's got all sorts of managing systems in here. I thought I had one in here. The link might have been broken, but you guys can Google it and find if this is what the field that you want to pursue. Just Google manufacturing information systems and see what you come up with. That'll be part of your research project for your presentation, is to actually research what's out there, look at the different products. You're going to install them, learn a couple, select one, and do a presentation. I'll explain all that in another video. Financial information systems. Here's another one. A lot of you might be in accounting. And if you're in accounting, there is a lot of different systems. Now, the one I had picked out here, and it looks like the link is broken, is called SAP. I think it's Simple Accounting Practice or Professionals. Anyway, it's a large international organization that deals specifically with financial information systems. And if you're in accounting, I would definitely ask you to have a look at this area because it might be something you might want to pursue. SAP has a large organization here in Vancouver. They consume an entire city block of downtown Vancouver, and they are global players. They're all over the world. So definitely look into them if you're in accounting and you want to pursue that as your area. Used to provide information to financial executives in a timely manner. So, of course, this all has to do with systems that are collecting data on finances and asking questions about finances and outputting the information to them. If you're in marketing, again, there's marketing information systems. And again, I've got a link here. This is probably the #1 online software as a service online marketing system. It's called Salesforce. And a lot of students that are in marketing, they have selected this as their particular product that they're going to research. And if you're going to do that, I think you can sign up for a free trial right here. If you have questions, you want to ask them about more information about their product, you can get in and do that. So this might be the area that you might want to pursue is Salesforce. It's a good one. Google them. I think they're one of the top NASDAQ stocks on the stock exchange as well. Okay, used to improve market decisions for management on selling products, talking to customers in a timely, accurate, integrated information way. So definitely meets all of the criteria of what a good information system will do. Marketing technology tools. I put up another link here with a bunch of other tools right here, so you can have a look at that. And there's other tools out there. So in the marketing information technology. So I'll let you guys have a look at that. And you can see here, if you're in marketing, this is more specific to the marketing students. You might be even getting into like email marketing or search engine optimization or search engine marketing tools. Mobile technologies, of course, is becoming the norm nowadays. Marketing automation, where these things are sequenced in timelines and products are delivered ahead of schedule, etc. All right, so from there, I think I've gone past my 25 minutes, so I'm going to pause here and I'll pick you up in the next video.